Democratic presidential candidates are attacking President Trump after a whistleblower complaint accused Mr. Trump of soliciting foreign interference in the 2020 election. California Senator Kamala Harris tweeted, "This is a cover-up." Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders called the report only the tip of an iceberg of corrupt and illegal behavior by President Trump. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren wrote President Trump believes he is above the law. And former Congressman Beto O'Rourke called on his former colleagues to cancel their upcoming recess, tweeting, "We can't wait to act." Joining me now, Leslie Sanchez, Molly Hooper, and Antjuan Seawright. Leslie is a CBS News contributor and Republican strategist. Molly, a CBSN political contributor and Capitol Hill reporter. And Antjuan, a CBSN political contributor and senior advisor to the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. Molly, I want to kick it off with you. We've seen both President Trump and Joe Biden are actually fundraising off this scandal, and presumably neither one wants to be involved. What do you make of this? Is this just sort of capitalizing on this moment that they think could help them raise some campaign cash?
Well, it's not just Trump, it's the Republicans as well. They're also capitalizing on this moment. It's a very polarizing moment in history, and it's something that both sides are seizing on, but I'm not sure that it's going to make things more affable or civilized, so to speak, up on Capitol Hill. But as we've seen in the past, these kind of scandals that come out and these big moments in history, both parties are going to capitalize it and try to make money off of it.
Leslie, in response to the hearing, President Trump's re-election campaign released this statement. They're calling the whistleblower complaint an even bigger hoax than the Russia delusion. Democrats are trying to block the inevitable re-election of President Trump because they know they can't beat him fair and square at the ballot box. So, okay, we know the White House doesn't want to be dealing with impeachment, but can you sort of explain how are they going to plan on handling all of this?
Yeah, I don't know the inner workings, Reena, of the campaign, but I will tell you kind of part of the effort is to deflect, to make it look like it's partisan politics as usual. I think what's interesting, if you look at all of those quotes that you just showed, from Kamala Harris to Bernie Sanders, certainly Elizabeth Warren, you could put that was the Mueller investigation, just insert here. It seems as regardless of what the president does, they've already got their canned response. And that's part of what makes Americans cringe when you think about politics and how this is going to play out. I think the Trump campaign is going to pull extremely to the right, say it's partisan politics. He's been talking about, I thought Hunter's in the previous segment from Yahoo had a very important point, that the Trump campaign have been preparing for impeachment because the Democrats have been talking about this for months. This has always been something they wanted to elevate one way or the other. And that kind of moves into what the president has been saying. And I think for average voters who didn't particularly like this president, they don't like his style, they don't like his politics, but they feel that he is good for the country for economic reasons or, whatever personal reasons, religious freedom, whatever it may be, are looking at this and just thinking it's so difficult now to tell the politics from really what's proper behavior. And that's what I'm hoping we slow this process down, unpack it, because it's fair to scratch your head, as a president trying to act like he's above the law. Nobody is going to tolerate that, but you could not have seen it from what was a political circus today.
Antjuan, I want to ask you, to Leslie's point there about this can kind of make Americans cringe. The Democratic candidates, impeachment wasn't their first point of reference here, that they want to get out to the voters. So could this really hurt the Democratic Party if they keep hounding impeachment when much of America is sick of the polarization of Washington?
I think there's a difference between polarization and flushing out corruption that continues to follow and overflow from this administration. The world will be going crazy, including the Republican Party, if this was Barack Hussein Obama having a conversation with their foreign leader about digging up dirt for their political opponent, and not to mention the silencing of a whistleblower action that we almost seen from this administration. Then what we saw in that report was so troubling, the fact that there's another server somewhere about these conversations. And what seems to get lost is, one, Congress has a duty and a responsibility to provide oversight and watch to the executive branch, number one, and number two, we cannot ignore these things when they happen because it sets a dangerous precedent going forward. Now, for the Democrats, as I wrote an op-ed piece in March of this year, you have to be able to investigate and legislate, because otherwise, yes, the general public, everyday people will get lost in the political shuffle and the noise. But I think the precedent has been set here today that we're going to flush out and investigate as we're scheduled and sworn to do, but we're also going to continue to legislate politically. And for Republicans who want to make this political, the President of the United States admitted to this on tape that he asked the Ukraine leader to dig up dirt on Joe Biden. And he was unapologetic about it.
I want to play for you a clip from Elizabeth Warren's campaign event. This was in New Hampshire yesterday, where she was actually asked about whether she'd allow the child of her vice president to sit on the board of a foreign company, just like Hunter Biden did in Ukraine.
Could you say whether or not under a Warren administration would your vice president's child be allowed to serve on a board of a foreign company?
No.
Why
I
not?
I don't know. I mean, I have to go back and look at the details on the plan.
Do you think there could be a problem?
I have to go back and look.
She said no, but then she'd have to go back and look. Molly, what do you make of this sort of new line of questioning that Democratic candidates are going to be forced with confronting on the campaign trail?
Well, the one thing that I was hearing from Republicans earlier this week, after Nancy Pelosi made her 5 p.m. announcement that she was launching an informal impeachment inquiry, was that the big loser in this whole situation scenario is Joe Biden. And regardless of whether or not the allegations of whatever was happening with his son in Ukraine and Joe Biden's role in that, whether that's true or not, substantiated or unsubstantiated, people are still talking about it. And it weakens him. And that's what Republicans were pointing to. They said, the person who's laughing, there's two people laughing right now. One is President Trump, because he would much rather run against somebody like Elizabeth Warren, who he calls Pocahontas, than he would against somebody like Joe Biden. And number two, the other person kind of laughing, if she's going to, would be Elizabeth Warren, because this would ostensibly weaken Joe Biden in the Democratic primary.
Antjuan, you're shaking your head. Why do you disagree?
Yeah.
Well, Molly, look at it this way. I think this strengthens
No, it's not me. I'm not saying this. This is what I've heard from Republican lawmakers.
I got you. But I'm saying for you to look at it this way. This strengthens Joe Biden because it proves the point that Donald Trump is afraid of him, so he's trying to weaken him. The danger in this is, yes, Trump is trying to push Joe Biden, but he's also trying to pull him down in a general election, much like we saw with Hillary Clinton. We cannot treat this the way we treated the Hillary Clinton emails, and that's the narrative that the Republicans want to paint. I think Mr. Castro did a wonderful job of calling out the media and the Republicans for how they should answer when it comes to Joe Biden. While we were sitting here watching the hearing, the prosecutor in the Ukraine once again cleared Hunter Biden of any wrongdoing during that time frame. And so I think we have to stick to that narrative and call out the Republicans for trying to make this political.
I want to get Leslie to weigh in. Leslie, if you're not a Democratic candidate, if you're not Joe Biden, essentially, what should the other Democratic candidates be worried about something like this, especially as the Trump campaign formulates their general election strategy?
I don't know that the same rules apply. You're talking about a former vice president. So let's look at it this way. This is about regarding his son. It's about access and privilege. You could make the same argument when people were very critical of Jared and Ivanka, the president's, son-in-law and daughter, using their access and privilege and being in meetings that they seemed, that they were not necessarily qualified to be in. There's certain perks that come, and the question is about corruption. Is it more than access? And the president on that call was talking about 2016. So I think if you just put it in that context, it puts the Democrats like Elizabeth Warren on fair ground. They're saying, isn't that what we're fighting against? Is kind of more transparency here, less access and privilege to the elite. You can make that argument regardless of what your politics is. And I thought the other thing that didn't come up that we didn't hear was that question from Congressman Hurd when he asked Admiral McGuire, what is the thing you're most concerned about? And he said it's not kinetic but cyber. It's about the integrity of the U.S. electoral system. That is where all these pieces seem to come back to and tie together. So I think that's why you've got voters backing up and saying, what is this really about? And when you're talking about corruption, is it on both sides and who's really accountable?
But Leslie, to that point, Donald Trump asked the Ukraine leader to dig up dirt on what would be or could be his political opponent in 2020, not 2016. So when you say what the DNI director was most concerned about is having free and fair elections, we agree. But we can't have that if Donald Trump or anybody, Democrat or Republican, is going to ask a foreign leader to dig up dirt on their political opponent. I think that's why the train came off the track, because that is fundamentally wrong.
But I think it's also why most Americans are just so confused by this. You've got both sides muddying the waters, and it's hard to separate what is fact and what can be really damning for the president and what just isn't. I want to play for you, though, on a little bit of a lighter note, kind of. If I can say that, there really isn't. This is Joe Biden actually on Kimmel last night talking about impeachment.
Do you think it is an impeachable, this particular instance is an impeachable offense?
Based on the material that they acknowledge today, it seems to me it's awful hard to avoid the conclusion that it is an impeachable offense and a violation of constitutional responsibility. But look, I am confident in the ability of the House and Senate to deal with this. My job is just to go out and flat beat him.
Flat beat him, Molly. What'd you make of his comment? I think it's the first time that he's been.
That's why Republicans were thinking, oh my gosh, Donald Trump is getting what he wants because he doesn't want to run against Joe Biden.
That's right.
And in launching, and one Republican lawmaker said to me, you know, President, you don't make $1 billion being stupid. You might not be book smart, but he's street smart. And President, they believe, these Republican lawmakers and these are from southern districts, believe that the president set this trap up for Democrats to walk in, whether you agree with it or not, because again, the more the waters are muddy, and the more that people are talking about Joe Biden and some corruption involving his son and acts when he was vice president, whether they're substantiated or not, that story is still out there, or at least the confusion and the perception of some corruption is out there, and that's not that. It seems it would weaken a candidate, especially going into a primary.
I want to thank you, Molly Hooper, Leslie Sanchez, Antjuan Seawright, for joining us.